everybody, to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, a journey of emotional resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, with another journey segment today. I'm really excited to hear this person's story and their experiences. They shared a little bit with me, and I think it can be a really impactful one and just a really powerful story to share about going through some different things in life and then ultimately chasing that life that you want to make and the life that's going to make you happy as you try to pursue that. So welcome, Megan. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate your time for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we finally managed to make this happen with two moves and a hurricane.
Yeah, me too. I know it was a little bit tough there to try to get it to happen, but I'm glad everything was okay on your end because I know Texas got hit pretty hard there. So I'm glad we were able to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. We were without power for like 5 days, but thankfully we're back in action now.
That's brutal too. In that heat, were you able to at least get somewhere with some AC or with some power so you were able to stay cool during that time?
Yeah, when, let's see, the hurricane hit in the middle of the night Sunday, so we woke up Monday morning, had no power. Um, It rained most of that day, and I just had this feeling that it was not coming back anytime soon. And I lived for 13 years in Florida. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and so I'm really familiar with hurricanes. And I was like, something just did not tell me the power was coming back. This was my first one in Texas, though, and I know the power grid here is a little sketchy. So my boyfriend was here with us and we decided to make the best of it. So we loaded the kids up and we drove a couple hours out of town and we found this super cool like safari ranch hotel place and we went and it was amazing. The kids had a blast. We had a pool, we had AC, there was a safari ride, all these super cool animals, and we went horseback riding. So we're like, what hurricane? We came home and just had a couple more days of roughing it, camping style at home before the power finally came back on late Friday night.
Yeah, that's a way to make the best of a situation. I'm sure your kids loved being able to go and stay at a place like that for a few days.
Yeah, it was such a cool hidden gem, and it's like an old school. It's just now, I think, being commercially operated, but you can tell that it's been family operated for so long. And yeah, we had a blast. We really loved it. And that's my total mindset. Moving towards the topic of resiliency is when we're faced with something, it's like, okay, this is what it is. I can't change it. So how can I make the best out of it? And we had a conversation on the drive out to the ranch that, we're so grateful to be in the position that we're in, to be able to just kind of like up and on a whim go turn it all into a staycation, because when I was growing up, we did not experience hurricanes in that way. And so I was glad to be able to give the kids that experience because this was their first time actually riding out a hurricane.
That's a really good point and a good segue just into starting the conversation. But it's kind of like it sounds like almost a full circle moment of going through and experiencing that in a totally different way as you were growing up to be able to give your kids something during that experience that makes it something, where it's not fear or it's not, roughing it and give them something special in that moment that they're probably going to remember forever, because those little hidden gem places are the things that we remember as
Yeah.
we get older, and those little special vacations, and those are the moments that last a long time in our memories.
Oh, absolutely. And it was all three of their first time horseback riding. So, for reference, my kids are 15, 13, and 11. We're like in the middle of all of their birthdays right now. Um, And so it was their first time horseback riding, and they are all like so obsessed with it. They have not stopped talking about it. They all want to go horseback riding again immediately. So I definitely know this is something that will stick with them, and I'm so glad that we were able to have that experience. Um, and it does lend to my entire mindset towards parenting because I grew up in a environment where it was just exist and survive and get through the days and get through the challenges. And there was not much, there wasn't a lot of goal oriented towards thriving and really ex- coming up from where we were to a better place. It was just, here we are, we got to get through it. And then when we get through it, we're going to stay right here. And when I was 20, I had my first son. And when he was 2 years old was when, they start kind of developing personalities and all of this in their toddlerhood. And that's when I realized for myself that I really needed to change some things, that I needed to heal from some things. And there were changes I want to make in the way that I was parenting my son, which meant I really needed to kind of dig in. Growing up, I had the nature and the nurture of anger and violence and aggression. And while I internally felt like I wanted to be reactive to my son, my heart and my instinct as a mother just could not carry over what my mind or my emotions were trying to express. And so I grew up in a home where my father was abusive and my mom was very passive. And so it was again that sort of, it is what it is. Just turn 18. That was the whole perspective and mindset of childhood, was just make it to 18. And then I did, and I immediately became a mom. And so that was about the time that I really, really started pulling back from everything. There were things that I grew up with, like my entire family does everything very naturally. And I had a lot of experience with herbs and eating really well and how to take care of my body. And that I learned from my family and that I wanted to preserve. But then there were other things like how we dealt with our emotions and how we handled ourselves that I completely just wipe the slate and start over. And so I started there. And then when I was 30, I had a major surgery. I had had a hysterectomy due to just a lifetime of illness, and I had endometriosis. After having my children, I developed adenomyosis, and my body was just wrecked. And at that point, a hysterectomy was um, the only treatment really that would have given me any quality of life. And so I had a little struggle. I was turning 30, and then a month before my birthday, I found out that I was having this old lady surgery. And I really, really had to sit in that place and decided that I guess at that point it had been about 17 years I'd been suffering. And one of the reasons my children are spaced so closely is because I would have my baby and I would breastfeed, and then I would breastfeed into my next pregnancy. And I placed them so closely because my husband at the time and I were just kind of like, if we can, because I was told when I was 17 I would be infertile. I was like, if I can have them, let me have them. It keeps my period away. It keeps the pain away. Like, let's just pump these babies out. And so then after I weaned my daughter and I was done having babies is when all the symptoms started to really get worse. And so I went through, had the hysterectomy, and then a week later I had an embolism, a pulmonary embolism, as a complication of my recovery from the surgery. And that's really the point for me where that embolism just rocked my world in a way where I had been through so many things already. I made it to 18, I survived. I got pregnant unexpectedly, shockingly, because, 2 years prior, I was told that would be very unlikely to happen. And so my son's father and I got married. We were like, hey, this is going to be a lot easier to do together than it is apart. We'd never, our relationship, we were young, we were having fun, we had no intentions of being married, but we both really dug in and did it together, which to this day I'm super proud of us for. He works offshore still. He started going offshore about 2 weeks after we were married. So I did all of the at home and parenting stuff pretty much by myself for the first 10. Well, he still works offshore. So I've done it all mostly alone, but he really, really um, reveres his role as a father and his responsibilities. So I cannot claim being a single mom in the same way that many women can, because I'm so grateful to have had his support. But our divorce came shortly after my embolism because I sat in the hospital bed. He actually saved my life. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place. It's been like 5 years since this.
That's all right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so he works offshore, and he had come home unexpectedly. He tweaked his, or he threw out his back climbing out of his rack. He missed a rung on a ladder and landed wrong, and so they sent him home to rest. And this was, I had had my surgery, and then I think 2 days or 3 days after my surgery, he had to go back to work. And then he was only at work for a few days. So I think this was 6 or 7 days post-op. He gets sent back home. And the next morning I woke up and it felt like I was breathing glass. And I am always like, it's not a big deal. Medically, I'm very, very reserved about things. Generally, it's not that serious. It's something that, you can handle or it'll pass or whatever. And so I was like, well, maybe I just kind of like slept wrong and I got a weird muscle thing. And I was trying to take it easy, and the day goes on. I had my girlfriend come by and listen to my lungs because I was like, okay, worst case, it's maybe pneumonia because I just had surgery. Lungs sounded clear, and I was like, I'm just going to take a nap, let it rest, see how I feel in the morning or when I get up. And then my ex-husband came and woke me up, and he said, I called your doctor. You have to go to the emergency room now. And so he took me to the emergency room. And then it was just like a blur whirlwind where we walk in and he's like, she's having chest pains. She's a week post-op and da da da. And the next thing I know, I'm like in, I don't remember if it was a CT or an MRI or something. And then they come in and they tell me that I have a blood clot in my lung. And I'm like, what? And they said, yeah. And the reason you have that pain is because it has infarcted, which means that the blood circulation had been cut off and the lung tissue was beginning to die. And that was when I started. I had no symptoms of anything until that point. And so they couldn't, my blood was very, very thick. They couldn't tell if I had any more clots anywhere. I had no symptoms of the clot to begin with. They were like, there's a less than 1% chance that this would happen to you. You're young, you're super fit, you're really healthy. We don't know what's going on. And so it was the first time I'd experienced the doctors really being concerned. And I laid in the hospital bed for 3 days. And I thought about, like, am I going to see my kids again? They wouldn't let me get out of they had me cathed. I couldn't get out of the bed to go to the bathroom. I couldn't get out of the bed to take a shower. They were just like, we don't know if you're going to throw another clot. It could happen at any moment. So you just basically freeze. And so but I felt fine. And all of my faculties are fully there. And my mind naturally goes a million miles a minute. So then in this scenario, I'm like, what the hell? Like, how is this real life right now? And I just thought about life, and I thought, if I don't leave this hospital and this is it, I don't see my kids again, what am I like? What is the legacy that I've created? And besides having amazing children who I'm incredibly proud of, uh, I, as an individual, as the human being that I am, just, I realized I wasn't happy enough to die. And that's what it came down to. In that moment, I said, I'm not happy enough to die. So I promised myself that if I did go home, then I was going to do everything differently. And so that's what I did. So I left the hospital, and my husband at the time and we were already kind of going through some motions as you do, a decade into a marriage that was kind of like a teamwork pact. And as I was becoming more and more serious about, look, we gotta figure something out. This was early September, and then by January we had decided it was time for us to separate. So we spent a year going through our separation. We had a couple of close friends that knew, but none of our family knew, none of our friends knew. We wanted to be very personal with everything. Our kids didn't know. And of course, his career going offshore was really helpful in that because we weren't really together much. I would travel when he came back, and we were just really busy and we weren't seen together very frequently. But we spent all of that time just kind of putting everything out on the table because my parents had split up when I was 16 or 15, and it was a horrible experience. There was a restraining order. There was just my siblings and I were in the middle of everything. And I said to him, I was like, I don't care how either of us feel. We can hate each other. We can love each other. We could be angry. We can be whatever we are. But when it comes to these kids, we're just their parents. Like, that is all that matters, is that they can have both of us in the same room together at the same time. And it doesn't feel any different in their perspective of their parents are there for them and they're supportive to them. So that's why we spent the year just going through everything. We didn't want any other opinions involved as we figured out how we navigated this transition of our family, because we were committed to remaining a family, but what does that look like? And we weren't going to do it the traditional divorce way. We were going to do it our way, as is very typical for me. I have a tendency to just do life completely on the fringe. And so we spent that year, and then we told our kids, and that was the moment that I knew that when we decided we were ready to tell the kids, I was like, okay, there is absolutely no going back from this now. And we both agreed. We told our kids that, then we were done. And so that began a transition into, I was ready. We had moved from Florida to Tennessee, and then several years after we moved to Tennessee, the embolism and then the separation and all of that. And I realized that I was ready to, Tennessee had given me a lot. It held space for me to go through some massive transformations in my life that were very personal transformations with my faith, the types of friends that I was keeping around, and my relationship with my family as well. And so I just was ready to leave it all behind. So I moved to Texas out of the clear blue. Um, and so I moved out to Texas, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it. I just know that this feels like the right thing. And growing up, my grandma had always told me, listen to yourself. I think every single time that I saw her, which was frequent, she always told me, listen to yourself, listen to yourself. The most important thing you can do is listen to yourself. And so that was so deeply ingrained in my mind that I just, thankfully, and I'm so grateful to her for this, thankfully, I didn't know how to function any other way. And so as I was going through all of these transformations in my life and making these radical and big decisions that had massive impact, I just listened to myself. And I really learned how to trust myself. Um, so I couldn't explain to anyone why I was moving to Texas because my family was all in either Florida or Tennessee, and then my extended family in Georgia. So I was just going off on my own. Me, the kids, my ex-husband agreed. He's like, I'm offshore, so I'll follow you wherever you want to go. And when he was gone, it was just us in a brand new place. And so I was like, okay, first thing I got to do as a single mom who's mostly stayed home in the last decade was figure out how I support myself. How do I how do I become independent and stable while I'm still doing the majority of the parenting 100% of the time? And I moved to Dallas, and when I got to Dallas, life really just rolled it out to me. And unreal kind of way. I met amazing, like truly amazing people who I'm so close with. They have become family to my kids and I. We actually go back to Dallas very frequently and we visit and spend time. I was called on the phone randomly one day and offered a job that was absolutely perfect. It gave me the opportunity to uh, have an income that I could provide for myself and my kids by myself if needed. I could provide benefits, like insurance, everything. And for anyone who knows, like as a single mom who was a stay-at-home mom, you have nothing to offer in the working world. I am not a valuable human being in regards to employment. Um, but I was really, really good at this job and I killed it and I loved it. I enjoyed it, but my kids were suffering. I was in sales, and so I was really busy. There were some days I'd get the kids up, send them to school, go to work, have events or clients after work. By the time I came home, the kids had already fed themselves and put themselves to bed, and I didn't see them until I woke them up for school the next day. And I just, it was too much. They were not ready to be that independent. And their dad and I were seeing that they were the ones who were really sacrificing. Um, they were kind of becoming latchkey kids that were really raising themselves. And we had both worked really, really hard to give them the support and the environment that we both valued, that we agreed was important for them. We wanted them to grow up in a specific type of environment where they felt very supported. And my absence, along with his absence, was not providing that. So I was really struggling with the decision to leave my job because I was like, well, life told me to come to Texas, and I came to Texas, and then life rolled out the red carpet, and I have an amazing job. I have an amazing community around me. I love it, but my kids are suffering, and none of this is worth anything if my kids are suffering. So I was struggling with the decision, and my girlfriend, who I met immediately after moving there, I joined a yoga studio, which she owned. And so we met at her studio and just immediately became like soul sisters. And so this was about a year into living there. And she calls me and says, hey, I'm going to Costa Rica for an ayahuasca trip. Do you want to come? And I had never done ayahuasca. I was very interested in it, but I hadn't experienced it. And I said, absolutely. So we super whirlwind. We get on a plane Friday, Thursday night. We get to Costa Rica. No, I'm sorry. We get on a plane Friday morning. We get to Costa Rica. We drive an hour and a half into the jungle and we sit in ceremony. There's a small group. The shaman comes, he travels from Colombia, and there's a small group in this setting. And we sit for 2 nights, and then Sunday morning, we get up from the last ceremony, we got back on a plane and came home. So it was really quick. But Friday night in our first ceremony, as we're sitting in the medicine and I'm starting to kind of feel the effects of the medicine and go into my journey with it, the very first place that I went was in regards to my job. And I very clearly got the message that anyone in the world can do your job at work, but only you can do your job at home. And I remember going, okay, got it, done. And then the journey kind of shifted gears and took me on a ride from there. Um, and so I came home Sunday night, went to work Monday morning, and put in my notice. And I had no idea what I was going to do from there, but I just knew it was the right thing. And then I spent the next few months just kind of settling back into life with my kids. My ex and I kind of shifted our arrangements around where he was very, very supportive. My being home supports him in his career. So we were able to redirect things and bring me back home with the kids again, which we were both really grateful for, and the kids were very thankful for as well. And so then I was like, well, what do I do now? Like, the universe handed me all the things that I asked for and then told me to walk away from it. So, like, what do I do now? And I then had my same girlfriend call me and said, hey, do you want to sit with Bufo? And I said, what the hell is Bufo? And she's like, well, it's this frog venom. It's 5-MeO DMT, and it's the strongest psychedelic that we have. And I was like, okay, say less. Sounds like a journey I need to go on. I believe very strong I believe very strongly that earth medicines come to you, or they call to you when you're ready for them. And so Bufo I had never even heard of, and I was like, okay, done. And so like 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in the ceremony in Bufo, and that just was the most profound experience of anything I've had in my life. Um, Went through an incredible integration period. It really just, it was profound ego death, where the will that I had in regards to anything, everything, I do not consider myself a controlling person or a control freak in any way, but I realized that medicine showed me the ways that I was really trying to control the flow of life and had this tight grip on what experience are my children having. Like, I have to give them the correct experience. I have to teach them all of the correct things. And I put this immense pressure on myself, not, and I didn't realize I was doing it because I didn't batter myself with it. I just burdened myself with it, where I was responsible for every failure that, or perceived failures in the future that I would look back on and be like, oh, I should have done that different, or I should have known better. Just trying to fill all of the gaps that were the voids in my own growing up. And as I became an adult and as I became a parent, and I was like, fuck, nobody ever told me this, and I wasn't prepared for that. And I don't even know, like, I didn't know so much about the emotional experience of life, the spiritual experience of life. I just was so unprepared because all I knew how to do was survive. And I was fucking phenomenal at that. That's why, like, let me tell you, when it comes to a natural disaster or a crisis, like, I should be number one on everybody's speed dial because I know how to get into action. But when it comes to slowing down and stepping back and surrendering and accepting, sometimes life is just, all the time, life is going to do what it's going to do. And the only thing that I can do is respond to that. And the only thing that I can be in control of is my response to that. And I realized that much of the experiences that I had had and what I had been called to, how I had been called to respond to those experiences were lessons inside of lessons in surrendering. And my yoga bestie that I met in Dallas, her name's Aiko. As soon as we met, we got into these deep conversations. She started telling me, she's like, "You have control issues." I said, "Me? Really? Are you sure?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, not like." She's like, "You're super laid back. Like if plans change or whatever, somebody needs something, you are so laid back, but like you have deep control issues." And I'm so grateful for her for being that mirror for me because I was able to really dig in and explore, okay, well, what does that mean? What am I trying to control? Where am I trying to control things? And um, I just went through such that entire, first year and a half in Dallas was that journey. So then after Bufo, throughout my integration period, I realized that at that time I was 34 years old. I became a wife at 19 and a mom at 20. And prior to that, I was the oldest girl in my family of four siblings. And so I had always been taking care of people. I had always, my entire life, had always orbited around other people. And I didn't really know who I was. I'd been through so much and I was just surviving it. And I was just like, on to the next thing. Okay. But I had never taken time to just be alone. And so last summer, I told my ex-husband, I said, "Hey, I need to take some time. I need you to have the kids. I need a break from everything." And he said, "Okay, that's fair." He's like, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I think I'm going to travel." And he goes, "Where are you going to go?" And when he asked me that question, the first thing that came to mind was Bali. I was like, "I think I'm going to go to Bali." And he was like, "Oh, that's random." And I was like, "Yeah." And he works a 28 on and 28 off schedule. So he could have the kids for 4 weeks. And I said, "Yeah, that's a big trip. And I think I need a little bit more than I would have had, like maybe 3 weeks there with travel and everything." And so I said, "Would it be possible for you?" He had never taken time off from work ever in his, 15-year career. He had never taken intentional time off. And I said, "Could you take some time off so that you can have the kids a little longer? And I'd like to stretch as much time out of the summer as I can." And so we worked it out, and I was traveling for 7 weeks. And I went to Bali. So I literally, and this was an exercise in surrender for myself because I was, as the primary caregiver to my children for their entire lives, I was putting myself as physically far away from them as I could possibly be for as long as I could possibly manage. And it was the most uncomfortable experience that I could conjure up for myself. So I said, "This is what we're going to do." And I was deep in this conversation with God at that point in time and I would write it on my wrist every day: "Don't get comfortable. Don't get comfortable." And the, the mindset that I was trying to embody through that period was, I am not going to get a little bit of what I believe that I want or what I believe is going to make me happy and then just get comfortable and stay there. I was intentionally going to keep pushing if my internal knowing said, "This isn't it. This isn't it. Keep going." And so to really, really put myself, because I live in the extremes, right? So I don't know if you know anything about human design, but I started studying my human design, and I learned a little about my gate of extremes, and I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense because if I do something, I am going to do it radically. And so I said, I need to be uncomfortable. The most uncomfortable thing for me is being away from my kids because my anxiety is something could happen. And if you're not right there, like, who's going to take care of everything? And so, what's the most uncomfortable thing as a paranoid, anxious mom is being 5 days away from your kids. And so that's where I put myself. And I had to sit in that space for 7 weeks. And in that time, I was about 2 weeks into that. I found a couple of ways to fill my time. I do not plan. I'm not like, I just go with the flow. So I said, what am I going to do for 7 weeks in Indonesia? And I decided to go to yoga teacher training, and I was like, well, that's 3 weeks. And then I'm sure on the other side of those first 3 weeks, I'll have figured something else out that I'll do next. And I did. It was an incredible, incredible experience. And I'm so grateful to everything and everyone that helped kind of fill in for me back home and supported me to have the space for that experience. 2 weeks in, I had for the first time in my adult life only had to worry about myself every day. I didn't have to feed anyone. I didn't have to do anything for anyone. I didn't have to think for anyone, just me. And in that space, I started having some repressed memories from my childhood began to surface. Um, and I I had known for most of my life that there was something I didn't know, but I was very comfortable with not knowing. I said, if I'm going to remember it, I'm going to remember it, but I'm not going to dig for it. And that was the time where my mind said, okay, now you're going to remember it. And they were memories of sexual abuse from my mother's father when I was young. And it was not a surprise to me. And I reached out to my siblings and we started having some conversations. And it was not a surprise to anyone. There was a lot of reason why those puzzle pieces made a lot of sense. Um, and I had struggled with my relationship with my mom most of my life. We are very, very different personalities, and we just clash. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this with her. And so I said, you know what? I'm over here. I am going to lean fully into this experience as much as I can while I'm here and put a pin in this because I know that once I really start getting into it, this is the part where I'm going to fall apart. And so thankfully and let me tell you, the universe, God, whatever you call it, works in incredible ways because when I was in yoga teacher training, which was the very first thing I did when I got to Indonesia, um, I was paired up to roommate with this girl who was not originally supposed to be my roommate. We were rearranged to be together at last minute. And she and I met. And again, it was like sparks, and we were just deeply connected to one another. And she held such beautiful space for me every night through the rest of it was like the last week of our teacher training that I was trying to process all of this. And she was so supportive and loving to me. And I was so grateful because I was on the other side of the world and I was alone. And then this sweet little angel came into my life and I wasn't alone. And so spent the next week trying to compartmentalize things enough that I could see out the rest of the experience that I was supposed to be having. And that is like a whole other podcast, so I won't go too deep into that, but it was so incredible. I came home, and as expected, within a couple of weeks, I just started to spiral, and not in a, I mean, it was an excruciating way, but I knew that I was okay. I knew that I was just feeling the feelings because we hold on to repressed emotion. And we always hear, like, let it go, let it go. But what does that mean when you let it go? You have to let it out. You have to actually feel the things that you never felt. So I sat in all of these, the last 3.5 decades of emotions that I have been carrying, some knowingly, some unknowingly, because then, and my brother put this perfectly, is it set off a nuke inside of our family. That whole thing forced my siblings and everyone to look at one another, look at our parents, look at just everything. It was like the floodlights had come on and you realized how fucking filthy and disgusting everything was. And you're like, I've been here this whole time. And so it made us all extremely uncomfortable. And I had no communication with my mom. She chose not to um, talk to me through it. She basically denied that her belief of everything, and then I didn't hear from her, and I came home, and it is, admittedly, it is so much easier to just stick your head in the sand and la 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 until enough time has passed that you can just ignore that anything ever existed. But that is not me. And I had to come to terms with the fact that my relationships with my siblings, who I felt were so profound in my life, was not really what I had always thought them to be. And I don't blame them for that. I know that as much as I went through, they went through, and we all handle things in our own ways. And so, while my experience from my perspective, I felt like I don't think I would have felt any different. I don't think I would have grieved any harder had my family actually physically died, because that was the experience that I went through. I spent day after day for probably a good month. I could make it as far as my bathroom, and then I just fall on the floor crying, just sobbing. And I grieve the loss of every important core relationship in my life from the perspective of my inner child. Uh, Little Megan lost her family, which, as a child, that's always our greatest fear, right? To lose your parents or your siblings or whatever. And I had been doing this work in the last 4 years since my embolism, of what does it mean to love myself? Because I thought that I loved myself, but life kept showing me and giving me these experiences that I was like, well, maybe I don't. Like, what does it even mean? What does it mean to love yourself? So then, ending up in Bali was part of that journey for me of like, how do I love? What does it mean to me? Because you can tell me what it means to you, but I can only love myself in the way that I need to be loved. So how do I do that? And healing a lot of my inner child experiences, and it all culminated in first there's the juxtaposition of your mom, and you're trying not to damage your children in the same way, and you're also trying to heal and nurture your own inner child. um, and it culminated in that trip, which brought up and put right out in front of everyone all of these things that we had the opportunity to face, how we were going to face, and deal with how we were going to deal with. And by the time I had come home, it had been almost 2 months no, I'm sorry, almost a month and a half, or right around a month, a little over, since everything began and the memories came up and the conversations with my family began. And I had seen their reactions and their responses in that time. And that's when I had to accept, where things were, and that those relationships were not what I had always thought. And I went through that loss and that grieving. And then I decided it was time to leave Dallas. And I said, okay, well, I think that Dallas has held its space for me and I've gotten what I'm going to get from it. And now it's time to move on. But I had lost my sense of home because I wasn't going, I wasn't going to move home to where any of my family was. I'm not from Texas. That wasn't really my home. And I realized that it was time to find what home really was and what home meant, and to find that place for my kids so that they have their sense of home. Because I had dragged them around a couple of times from Florida to Tennessee to Texas. And and my ex-husband was very supportive of this. He was not a huge fan of Dallas. And so he was grateful when I told him that I was ready to move on, but I didn't know where. So in doing things the way that I like to do them, I decided that my lease on my house ended in January and I was going to choose homelessness. So we sold off most of the things that we had. I had already been homeschooling two of my children. And then my oldest, we kind of said, okay, after Christmas break, you're going to homeschool for the rest of it was his freshman year. We're going to homeschool and travel. So that's what we began doing. And the January, I spent selling, purging, getting rid of everything, packing what we were going to keep, and moving it out of the house. And then February, we flew over to Europe and we hobo traveled around Europe a little bit. We flew into Amsterdam, and I intentionally wanted to make it a difficult travel experience because my concern had been, I don't want my kids to be too well taken care of, if that makes sense. I learned a lot through the ways that I struggled growing up. I learned so much about how to be resilient, how to be resourceful, all of these things. And I said, I want to give my kids a better life and a better experience, but I also want them to learn these things. And so it was through a sort of organized, intentional, chaotic travel experience that I orchestrated a bit of that, because we flew into Amsterdam. We lugged all of our luggage on and off the train. We went through Germany, France, down to Sweden. And the crown jewel of this whole trip was skiing, because my kids love to ski. And so several years ago, we started doing, for Christmas, you can either we'll take a trip or you can have presents. And they consistently have chosen trips. And so I was like, how about we take a big trip this year and we get rid of the house and we get rid of everything and we take all of that money and we put it towards just traveling full time. And honestly, my ex-husband is a saint. I cannot tell you, we're the best of friends. We're family and we always will be. But he's just so used to me. We've known each other since I was 14 and he was 16. I guess he's just so used to like Megan's craziness. And he's kind of on board with a lot of it now. He's like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Sure. He's like, I'm going to go back to work for a month anyway, and then you figure this out. So we go and we spend a month traveling Europe. And then the plan was that he was going to come back to the States and go to work. And I was going to continue on with the kids. But unfortunately, we got to Switzerland. We got one day of skiing in, and we all came down with some nasty flu. It was really, really rough. And I lost all of my energy for being in Europe in the cold misery over there at that point. And um, we agreed that it would be best for the kids and I to travel home with him when he came back to work and kind of regroup, recover in the Texas heat. And then once we were ready, because we would, Airbnb, I had a girlfriend that we kind of home based out of. So the things we wanted access to, we left at her place and we would pop in and out. Um, or we would Airbnb and travel around the states. I was completely open. I said, I don't know where I'm supposed to call home next. So I was open to anywhere in the world. I was like, spin the globe and just throw a dart, and I'm willing to move there if that's where we're supposed to go. And we came back to Texas. We came back to Texas and then had a crazy couple of months. We ended up staying so that I could help my girlfriend with her situation and her kids while she was doing some travel nursing. And then in that time, I met someone. I had been single for a few years because I was like, my life is insane. And my ex-husband is very involved in my life, and everything in my world revolves around my kids. It would take an incredibly specific type of man to be in a relationship with me, and I don't think that he even exists. So I was completely content with being single until my kids were grown. And I hadn't been dating. I had been making no efforts to date. And I came home and I woke up one morning and the very first thought I had was to make a Hinge profile. And I was like, ew, absolutely not. I had sworn off online dating like fully and completely. And everyone who knows me knows that that was absolutely true. And I argued with that thought in my mind for a little bit. And then I finally conceded, and within like 2 hours this guy sends me a message and we started talking. And then I had some more travels coming up, and so it was a little bit before I was free to meet him. And then we met and we pretty much have been together ever since. And I said, hey, I'm kind of homeless right now and I didn't really plan on dating and I don't know where I'm going to end up living, so like proceed with caution. And he was like, okay, well, whatever happens, happens. And then I ended up finding, my ex-husband and I were like, it's gonna be time to start settling down um, by the fall, because we had promised our oldest son that he could get back into school. And so I was like, okay, I don't know where. And he's like, I don't care where. You just need to figure out where you want to live, and we need to start, taking steps to make that happen. And then he ended up finding a house and sent it to me, and I loved it, and it was everything that I was wanting. And it was within an hour of uh, my new boyfriend I had started seeing. So without me even realizing it, life was just kind of took me around the world and then brought me back pretty close to where I already was. And I just barely started putting my feet back on the ground. And so now we're walking into the next chapter of what am I doing now?
Yeah, I mean, uh, wow. Uh, that is, that is something that stood out to me, and a reason why I want to have a conversation with you is you have this line on your Instagram, and it makes complete sense to me now. And I don't know if I'm saying it word for word, but something along the lines of, be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire, or something along those
Yes.
lines.
Be
And just
fearless in
listening to
pursuit.
you,
Be fearless in
yeah,
pursuit
go ahead.
of what sets your soul on fire. Correct.
Yeah, and just listening to you go through, um, where you started, and then where that took you, and those different decisions you had to make, and those different choices you made, and the way, you kind of went with it is truly amazing. And to come from, you use the word survivor, that you just survived growing up
Mm-hmm.
from what you were in. And I think what you just explained is such a, you know, that I think you're more than that, just from what you've gone through and the way you've handled it, and how you've not let it affected, the way you're parenting your kids in a negative way, or the choices you're making, or, just a lot of these little things that sometimes, creep back into our lives from habits we saw
Mm-hmm.
from people around us, or, what we grew up in, and then they kind of start coming out through us as we get older. And, that really truly a remarkable journey of self-discovery, and going through a
Yeah.
lot of different things in life. And like I definitely, the from everything you were talking about, I was very surprised by the ayahuasca trip,
Yeah.
and going through that and experiencing that. Um but there was a couple things that I just want to ask you about kind of real quick. When you were talking, you had mentioned, like, when you started realizing some of those, you got home and you started spiraling a little bit, um
Yeah.
and you said you were spiraling but you felt okay, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like, can you just explain that a little bit? Because I think that's so powerful, in the sense of, like, when we have bad days, or where we experience negative emotions, we sometimes hold on to those and we think that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
forever, or we feel like we're not okay just because we're experiencing something negative, or something that is hard to experience, maybe uncomfortable to
Mm-hmm.
experience. And so when you can say, like, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say I'm spiraling, but I'm okay. I think that's
Yeah.
a really powerful way to put that. If you could just, like, kind of explain what that looked like in your mind a little bit.
I had this moment where I and it my so I was with my kids. My ex went offshore, and at this point in my life, I was deeply under a rock. I came back from Bali, and I had very little interaction. I wasn't going out. My few close friends would, like, "You still there?" They knew that I was just, like, deeply inside of myself, working through everything. And as I went deeper and deeper, I had this moment, and my kids, they were just being kids. It was just something super normal. I don't remember what it was, but it just overwhelmed me. I just couldn't even hold it together enough for them anymore. And I went into my room and I went into my closet, and I was just crying, like deep in your chest, like heaving, just the beyond ugly crying. It was just, my soul was breaking open. It was that moment where I had to completely surrender to I was just like, I think the first time I experienced this was when I was in the hospital, and I've had a few different experiences, um, a couple of times in plant medicine, where I just had to say, if this is it, if this is the moment that I die, then this is it. There is nothing more that I can do. And I had to completely surrender in my mind to whatever outcome was ahead of me. Because in that moment, I was just so broken hearted. I was so devastated, and I was feeling all of these enormous emotions. But in my spiritual journey, that is happening concurrent to all of this stuff. I explained how it was presenting in my life, but internally there's this incredible journey going on at the same time. And in that journey, and this is the things that goof up with that ego death, is I really understood that I am two beings sharing an experience. I am a physical human being made of cells and carbon and minerals, and I'm a body that feels sensation both externally and internally. And I'm also an eternal spiritual being that is a soul, or whatever you want to call it, sharing together as a team this experience of life. And so as my body was going through the experience of the emotions, as I'm feeling all of this energy move through me, and I'm feeling the devastation and the grief and the loss and the fear, I have never felt so alone in my life. At the same time, and let me back up. In that moment, there was this moment where I'm in the closet and I'm crying, probably harder than I've ever cried, because I had to learn how to cry throughout this whole journey, right? Because when I was growing up, we weren't allowed to cry. If we cried, we would get in more trouble. So we learned to shove it all in. And I understand that crying is a healthy physical way to release energy. And so I'm allowing myself to cry. And I remember having this thought where I was like, I understand why people commit suicide. I understand the feeling of just, there's no ground under you. It just feels like you're in this void, because those emotions are bigger than our bodies know how to handle. And our brain, being a physical part of our body that we amalgamate with our mind, and our brain doesn't always have the ability to process these huge emotions. And so in the past, another version of me would have, my anxiety would have kicked in, and I would have just been frantic, and I need to control this, and I need to do something. But the other part of me that experiences this life, the spiritual side of me, knew that I was okay, knew that I was just going to sit there and I was going to cry, and part of me was going to die, and then I was going to come through it. And I didn't know how long that was going to take, and I didn't know what that entire process was going to look like, but I trusted myself. And so that's where I knew I was going to be okay, even though it was the most devastating experience I'd ever had.
Yeah, I am so glad I asked you that question now, because that was that was such a wonderful explanation of feeling both of those things simultaneously at the same time. And even just
Yeah.
the way you were ending that, and talking about how you don't know how long it's going to be, you don't know what that process is going to look like, but you still had that feeling. And I think that is such a powerful thing to share and explain. I'm so glad you went into more detail about that, because I think that can be such a powerful tool for people when we're in those bad moments, those rough moments where we don't know how we're going to get through it. We don't know how long it's going to last, but if we can just know we're going to get through it, and we can just know there's going to be another side to that, that can be enough to keep people going through those hard times and get people through those.
Mm-hmm. I stopped saying that I know things, and I trust things now. So I don't know how it's going to work. I trust it's going to work. I don't know when it's going to happen. I trust it's going to happen. Um, because that's the trick of the mind, is that we have to know. We are supposed to know. And if we don't know, we have to figure it out. And for me, my thing is take the mind out of it and just be with it and trust. And that is definitely much easier said than done. um, and it is a practice. So through many of these experiences that I've had, I've been able to have the opportunity to mentor others. I have kind of become like your crisis bestie. Um, I have had the opportunity to mentor others through their divorces, through, health issues. And I was just speaking with a girl who we started working together last year when she was dealing with botulism from Botox toxicity, which wrecked her whole body. And now she's going through some other health things. And I'm so grateful for my experiences now on the other side because I trusted them. I allowed them to happen. And now I've been able to be in this place where I can hold that space for others, where because I am so radically like a little bit out of my mind, I think, in tune with both parts of myself, I've always been able to hold space for myself. And now through all of this, I've been able to hold space for others when they're going through their difficult experiences and really just guide them in trusting themselves and trusting the experience and trusting life, because everything in the world wants us to believe that life is scary and dangerous and horrible. And I mean, you don't have to scroll very far on Instagram to find some incredible things to be afraid of. But at the end of the day, I trust that my soul decided to come into this body with whatever physical ailments it may have, into this life with whatever experiences it may have, because if I have the right perspective and the correct mindset that I know is right for me, I will take all of those things and I will grow from them within my soul. And when I left the hospital, I no longer feared death. I never really feared death. I had some pretty dark times in my teens where I was just very reckless because I didn't love the life I was living, and it wasn't much of anything that I couldn't control or influence. And so I was pretty much like, well, if I die, fuck it, who cares? And so I was very reckless, and getting pregnant kind of anomalously was my saving grace. And also for my ex-husband, he was on an even more reckless path than I was at that time. And so our children truly did save both of us. And we supported each other and we've grown up together. And I'm just grateful. I'm incredibly grateful because on the other side of that portion, that those few chapters, life is exactly what I would have dreamt of, or I did dream of when I was younger. And when every time I've dreamt of something, I've achieved it. And sometimes I realize that I was dreaming of the wrong things, and I would realign myself with what I truly wanted. What do I truly want? Do I want this big, extravagant life in the city? Or do I want a quieter, calmer, slower life where I can even get satellite internet? Um, and I was able to align myself with those things. And every time I answer that question from a deep place of knowing, not from desire or will or fear. Sorry, my cat's over there knocking over glasses of water.
Yeah.
Um, fear or from what the world tells me I should have or want or be, when I answer those questions from my place of knowing, it like I put in very little effort and it comes to me. And I do not like the word manifest, but I love the word alignment. I spend every day just focusing on aligning myself. And throughout these last several years, I've developed my practice that helps keep me in alignment. And those are the things that are really important to me. And so, and then even with, my relationship now, where I was like, this relationship does not exist. There is not a person who is going to tolerate all of the extreme weirdness of my life and then the complex nuances of me as a person, because I love who I am and I love the way I live and I love my freedom. And I was like, okay, well, here's, the more detailed I get and knowing what's correct for me, the more aligned I am when I find it. And so I'm loving everything. I'm grateful for it all, the good, the bad, the ugly. There leaves that little tinge in the pit of my stomach where I'm like, I know life's not over yet, so there's still more to come. And of course, the pendulum always swings both ways. So, I don't know that's where I'm working through right now, is that bit of fear of life is so incredible and the fear of it not being so. But I trust that even when difficult times come again, they will always, as they have always been, for a reason that'll carry me closer to the place that I'm meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been really it's been just really wonderful to listen to you talk about your experiences and your perspective and what you've learned. I think there was so much good, I don't know, advice, or there was just so many good little tidbits throughout what you were saying, where people trying it maybe in their own way, or trying to have that perspective or that trust that you talked about. And I love that you said, like, we try to know everything, and that's so true, and I feel like it does more harm than good. But there was so much in your journey and what you just talked about, that it was really an honor just to sit back and listen. Because I wrote down all these different, like, little notes as you were talking, and all these little pieces that really stuck out to me, and that, I mean, just thinking about it for my life and my perspective, and what I'm doing and what I'm trying to grow and to become, and what I want my life to look like. There was so much that just listening to you and how you've gone through that, it shows, like, be fearless in that pursuit. And I think you're a
Yeah.
great example of that,
Oh,
of that
thank you.
resilience and that survive. Yeah, of course. And just being able to continue to chase what you want out of life, and not let other people dictate that for you, not let society tell you, to go this way or that way, but to trust in yourself, like you've said multiple times throughout this, and
Hmm.
find what you want to find out of life. And I think that's what we could all do a little bit more in life.
Yeah.
Is trust ourselves, and go for what is
Yep.
really going to make us happy, and not think, just you talking at the end there about, the satellite internet, and what do you really want life to look like. And sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes we let society tell us what life should look like, and we let other
Yep.
people tell us what life should look like. And I think we end up going against what we truly feel and hear of what we want our life to look like. And I heard a lot of that in your experience, and you know, like I said, I wrote down so many little things. Hopefully, you know, I don't want to have it go too long. I don't want to keep you all night, but I mean, I hope we could have another conversation sometimes because there's so many little things I want to pick your your brain about and your perspective about. Um,
I would love
that
to. Oh, thank
it,
you.
yeah, it was a pleasure to hear your journey and for you to share your experience. And I just want to tell you, you know, I really appreciate your time to do that and your vulnerability to do that. I think there was so much people can take from what you just shared.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you. And that is something I have really come to understand. And I'd love to dig in with you another time about human design, because once I started learning my human design, so much about me started making sense. And one of the things is I have a self-projected authority. So my voice is how I navigate both myself and others. And bless my boyfriend, because I just will get on a tangent and go on, and then I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I've been talking forever." And he's like, "No, I love it." And so thank you for doing that, because it's a blessing to me, because I have lived it, but I don't go back and relive it sequentially this way very frequently. And so it's been a while for me, and I so appreciate being able to step back and look at my own journey in this way. And my as I have in recent years really come to understand that my words and my voice are my purpose. Um, I also made a commitment to myself and God, universe. I use them interchangeably, whatever, insert your preference here. Um, I made a commitment to just when the mic is open to me, I will share what needs to be shared, and I won't hold back through my I won't let the ego um, filter me. And that's why I am just so happy to. I think that the greatest lesson is when we can learn from other people's experiences, and I've done that. I have avoided so many experiences because I was able to learn from someone else having them. And so if I can offer that to others, then who am I to withhold that ability and opportunity from them?
Yeah, that's wonderful, and sharing your experiences, like you just said, it's so powerful to be able to learn from somebody and just listen and take that in and be able to take, you know, different things out of it and try to learn something new from different people.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we don't do that so much in society. Like you said, we want to know everything, we want to be right about everything, and so that gets in the way of so much of the ability to just listen and
Just listen.
take in somebody's journey and experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I just, you know, I appreciate it so much, and I'm going to look into the human design thing a little bit myself, and then hopefully we can set up another conversation, and you can kind of walk through it a little bit more and have a little conversation about it.
I'd love to. I've started incorporating it in my mentoring practice, because I've learned, myself, how just incredible it is for my kids, with my friends and my relationship. And so then I've started using it with the people when I mentor with them, because our individual design has so much to do with the way that we experience ourselves and one another and all of that. So, yeah, I'd love to. Let's plan it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I appreciate your time so much, and we'll definitely look at setting that up. So thank you again
Absolutely.
for sharing your journey and your experience, and it was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Brandon. And thank you for holding the space in this channel. It's so great. And you're offering that opportunity for people to come and learn from one another, and for so many different lives and experiences and journeys to be shared. So kudos to you for putting the effort into creating this resource for others.
I appreciate that. Thank you again, Megan. I appreciate that, and definitely this is a great perspective for others to come listen to and take something from your experiences. So it's been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.